Hi, I'm Eric Siegel, and welcome to episode 47 of Eric's Trains. Okay, it's mid-July 2014, and I've got a fun episode for you today. As many of you probably already know, I've recently completed the big steel bridge going across the main table in the main room here, and I'm really excited about it. So for the last few weeks, I've been working on a ribbon cutting video to celebrate the completion of the bridge, and that's what we're going to watch today. So let's go ahead and get started. Okay, so there it is. There's the completed steel bridge across the main room. Several years in the making and now complete. And I even put a little red ribbon across one side, and we're going to cut that ribbon in a few minutes and run some trains across the now completed bridge. But first, I want to spend a few minutes talking about some stats and history on the bridge. Those of you who have been following me for a long time and have been following the progress of this bridge may find some of this information a little bit repetitive. That's okay, but I want to get it out there for those of you who may be new to this, want to try to answer as many questions as I can before you have to ask them. So like I said, I'm going to spend a few minutes going over some stats and facts and history on the bridge, and then after that we'll run some trains across it. I'm going to try to run as many trains as I can. I'm hoping to run maybe 10 or 12 trains across it before we're done. Okay, let's go ahead and get started. The overall length of this bridge is about 19 feet. This is a stainless steel bridge. That's right, it's made from stainless steel, so it's very well made, very sturdy. You could probably stand on this thing and it wouldn't hurt it at all. So a big train going across this bridge is no sweat whatsoever. This was custom built for me by my good friend Jim Ballman. His company is called Stainless Unlimited, and he's out in Missouri, and he works with steel doing bridges and sculptures and so forth. And so he built this for me over a period of about 2 or 3 years. This was not the first bridge that Jim built for me. That bridge is over here. He built this for me around 2011, and I was so happy with it that I decided to go ahead and let him do the big bridge across the main table. And what a job he did, because this thing looks absolutely fantastic. I had Jim build this bridge for me in 3 sections, and I want to take a few minutes to talk about the process that we used to go about getting this thing built. Because to be honest, when I first started planning this bridge a few years ago, I was quite overwhelmed, because think about it. How do you effectively convey the shape of a bridge like this to somebody who's halfway across the country using only emails and phone calls? I mean, you just can't do it. It's not like it's a straight bridge and you can just say, oh, make it 20 feet long. There's all sorts of custom curves on this thing, and so unless you've got some sort of a degree in engineering or mathematics, it's really impossible to do. And so I was worried about it, but it ended up being okay because of a process that Jim and I developed that we perfected when we worked on the first bridge over here. And it's basically a 2-step process. The first step was that I would send him an email with the specs in terms of the height and width of the bridge, the design of the girders and the support towers and so forth. And then the second step was conveying the shape of the bridge. And I did that by sending Jim a package of sectional atlas track that I had color-coded with paints so that he could reassemble the track on his end in the proper order and know the exact shape that the bridge had to be. And as you can see, it worked out perfectly. Now, the finished product from Jim's point of view was not what you're looking at here. What he sent me was the raw, shiny stainless steel bridge. It wasn't painted, and it didn't have a deck up on top. That was my job. I wanted to do those things so that I could get them looking exactly the way I wanted. Here's a picture of what this section looked like when it first came in, and you can see it's pretty raw. So when each section came in, I would paint it, weather it, and then install it on the layout, and then the last step would be to add the deck. The walkways and the supports for the walkways are made from strips of basswood that I cut to size and then painted. And then the handrails are plastic handrails that are made by Plastruct, and I picked them up at a local hobby shop. And then I painted them and weathered them to match the rest of the bridge. And then in the middle, we've got the Atlas track, which is covered up by Brennan's Better Ballast. To weather the bridge and the handrails, I used a process called salt weathering. Salt weathering is a process that gives the bridge or train or whatever else you're weathering the appearance of peeling paint and rust, and I think it looks fantastic. Originally, I was going to paint the bridge a flat color, most likely a flat rusty brown, kind of like this bridge over here. But then one night I was down here and I thought, you know, I want this bridge to look used. I want it to be a little bit beat up. I'm going to try salt weathering. I had never done salt weathering before, so this was a new thing for me, and I think it turned out fantastic. It looks great. Now, if you're curious about the process of salt weathering and you want to learn how to do it, it's not that hard. It just requires a little bit of patience. And in episode 37 of my video train blog series, I did a complete demonstration of the salt weathering process on this support tower right here. So I started off with the raw stainless steel support tower, and I ended up with this right here. So if you're curious about the process, check out episode 37 of my video train blog series. Oh, by the way, salt weathering will work on both metal and plastic surfaces. You can see I did the salt weathering on the metal portions of the bridge as well as the plastic handrail. So don't worry about whether you're doing it on plastic or metal. It'll work on both. You wouldn't want to do it on a wooden surface because you wouldn't have rust on a wooden surface anyway, but it'll work on metal or plastic. And in fact, I learned the process of salt weathering from a book called Weathering by Tom Mann, and in that book, he did the salt weathering on his train, so it'll work on trains as well as structures on your layout. When it came time to install the bridge on the layout, in order to anchor the bridge to the table, I used these little concrete piers. Now, these are not made of real concrete, of course. These are wooden dowels that I've cut, sanded, and painted to look like concrete. But what I did is I anchored the support towers to the wooden dowels, and then the wooden dowels are anchored to the table with drywall screws, and so that's how the bridge is secured to the layout table. Now, this brings up an interesting tip that I want to give to anybody who may be new to the hobby, or maybe you're building your first layout and you're interested in putting a bridge on your layout. When you're doing your support towers, regardless of whether they're metal or wood or what have you, you want to make your support towers a little shorter than they need to be. You don't want to try to make them the exact length they need to be to get all the way down to the table, because the height of the layout can vary from area to area, even by a fraction of an inch. And then also when you're trying to get your bridge nice and level and straight, the height needed for each of these support towers can vary slightly. And so if you try to get them the exact length they need to be, you'll be forever chasing your tail trying to get them the exact proper length. So the better thing to do is to make them intentionally a little bit too short and then bring the layout up to the support towers. So you'll notice that on all of my support towers, they're about an inch or so shorter than they need to be, and then I use these little concrete piers to bring the layout up to the support towers, and that works much better, because the fact is that each of these little concrete piers is a slightly different height than the other ones, even by just a minuscule fraction of an inch. But that's what you need to get the bridge properly installed on the layout and make sure it's level and straight and it's going to work right. I did the same thing over here with the first steel bridge that I made. I intentionally made the support towers a little shorter than they had to be, and then brought the concrete piers up to the towers, and you get this really cool look, and yet it's an easy way to make sure that the bridge is at the exact height that you need it to be to get it level and straight and working properly. I mentioned that the bridge was built in 3 sections, so let me talk about that for a couple minutes. The first section to be completed was over here, and it starts here at the beginning, comes out like this, then starts to go back and ends right here. The first section is the longest of the 3 sections, about 8 feet long, and it includes these horizontal support towers, which are also made of stainless steel. Jim made all of the support towers on the layout, and they are all stainless steel with only one exception, and I'll talk about that when I get to the 3rd section of the bridge. But the reason this is the longest section is because I didn't want to make the dividing line between one section and another in the middle of a curve, because if you had a sectional divide in the middle of a curve, it would make laying the track problematical. You want to have a nice smooth curve and not have to stop what you're doing and restart again on a new section. So it was either make the first section 4 feet long and stop right about here, which would be kind of silly, or go all the way through the first big curve and end it as we begin to straighten out again. And so that's what I did. So that's the first section. The second section goes from here about 5 or 6 feet all the way until about halfway between those 2 towers there, right above the cab for that U.S. Army Genset Switcher. Now the second section has a unique support tower. On all of the other sections, the integrated support towers are angled outward so that they start up here and get wider as they approach the ground. But that support tower there is straight up and down in a square because I had space restrictions there. I had the track behind it, and then I have this pop-up hole right here so I can get access to that area of the layout. So I wanted to make sure that everything would fit, and so for that reason I made that support tower just go straight up and down, but all the other ones angle outward like these ones do. And then the third and final section started right above the cab for the Genset Switcher, and then came another 5 feet or so to the end right here. Now I mentioned that all the support towers are stainless steel and they were made by Jim. The only exception to that is on this support tower here. Because of the angle that I had to install the support tower at, I had to make the top a little wider than it was, and so I did that with some add-on plastic pieces. This is styrene plastic, and I secured it to the stainless steel tower with epoxy cement. And so these sections right here where it comes out to get a little wider, those are plastic. The rest of it, however, is stainless steel and was built by Jim. Now, speaking of the support towers, in some cases I had Jim weld the towers to the bridge. And if you look at this tower, for example, you can actually see the weld marks. So this tower is permanently welded to the bridge. If the bridge goes, the tower is going with it. In other cases, I had Jim package these support towers separately so that I could place them myself. And the general rule of thumb was that if there was a little bit of play in terms of where the tower could be, I would let Jim weld the tower in place. And if I needed a precision installation, I would do it myself. So, on this support tower, for example, it really wouldn't matter if Jim had installed it a 1/4 inch or so to the left or right. As long as it was in this general spot, I could make it work. But on this support tower, on the other hand, it's in a very precise spot, and so if it was off by even a 1/4 inch, there would be a problem. And so for this tower, I had him package it separately, and then I secured it in place myself using epoxy cement. And it's the same story with that tower there and a couple of the other towers. The horizontal support towers are the same thing. They were packaged separately, and then I slid them into position myself and secured them to the bridge with a little bit of CA glue. Anyway, I had Jim build the bridge in 3 sections for 2 practical reasons, both of which have to do with money. First of all, a custom-built steel bridge like this is not cheap. Jim charges about $125 per foot for his steel bridges. This is a 19-foot bridge, so you can do the math and figure out about how much I paid for this thing. So that's why I spread it out over 2 or 3 years so that the cost would be spread out and the hit to my wallet wouldn't be that big of a deal. And then the other reason is the shipping cost. It would cost a fortune to ship a 19-foot steel trestle, to say nothing of trying to get it into my basement. So it just made sense to split it up into several sections. And even at that, the shipping costs were quite high. The highest was for the first section, the 8-foot section, because it's so irregular shaped. Jim had to ship it to me in a wooden crate via freight, and so it cost about $200 to get the first section here. And the other sections weren't quite as expensive, but they were pretty pricey as well. I'd probably say overall I spent about $400 or $500 just on shipping to get this trestle in place. But in the end, it was all worth it because it just looks fantastic. Now, I realize that some people are going to say, wow, that's a lot of money to spend on a bridge. And it is, but again, I think it was worth it, and considering what I got, I think it was actually a pretty good deal. I mean, when you take into account the craftsmanship and work that goes into making something like this, I would challenge anybody to go out there and learn the skills necessary to work with metal and weld it, and then build a steel trestle like this and charge anything less than what Jim charged and still turn a profit. So yeah, it was expensive, but you know, you get what you pay for, and overall, I think it was worth it, and I actually think it was a pretty good deal. Okay, so the next thing I want to do is to talk about some of the subjective decisions that I made about this bridge. because the questions I'm most often asked about this bridge are subjective questions, like, hey Eric, why does the bridge look the way it looks? Why did you decide to do this instead of that? Why does the bridge go here instead of there? And other questions like that. And you know, this bridge was very deliberate. Everything on this bridge was done for a specific reason and a specific purpose. And so I want to take a few minutes to explain all that, and hopefully that will help to answer a lot of questions before you have to ask them. So first, let's talk about the design and the look and feel of the bridge. Why does it look like this? Well, when I was planning this bridge a few years ago, I knew it was going to be a steel bridge because this is a modern themed layout for the most part, and so a wooden trestle would have been inappropriate. So I got on Google and started looking at images of steel bridges around the country. And I found a couple sources of inspiration. The main source of inspiration for this bridge is a steel trestle in Martinez, California called the Muir Trestle. So if you do a Google search for Muir Trestle, you'll see lots of images of it, and that's where I got most of the inspiration for this bridge. Now, I stress inspiration. This is not a copy of the Muir Trestle. The Muir Trestle looks very much different from this, but if you take a look at pictures of the Muir Trestle and then you look at pictures of this bridge, there are many similarities, particularly when it comes to the design and the look of the support towers, the girders, and the deck. And especially the deck, that is very much like the deck on the Muir Trestle. So that was the major source of inspiration for this bridge. The second source of inspiration for this bridge was the elevated transit system in Chicago, Illinois, the L. And that has to do with these horizontal support towers, because the Muir Trestle does not have these. I knew that my bridge was going to swing out over these tracks down here, so I started looking for images of bridges that ride up over existing tracks or roads. And I kept coming back to images of the L system because it does exactly that. It rides up over the streets of Chicago. So that's where the original inspiration for these horizontal support towers came from. Now, again, I want to stress the word inspiration because the support towers for the L system don't look anything like this. So what I did is I looked at images of those supports on the L system. I liked the idea, and then I adapted that idea to my layout, and that's how I got to what you're seeing now. Now, while we're on the topic of inspiration, people often ask me why I have ballast on the deck of my bridge. Isn't that unusual? Well, some bridges have ballast on the deck and some don't. This bridge was heavily influenced by the Muir Trestle, and if you look at images of the deck on the Muir Trestle, you will see that it has a ballasted deck, and so that is the reason why my bridge also has a ballasted deck. Some people have also asked why the bridge curves the way it does, because if you think about it, there is no real-world reason for the bridge to curve like this, because typically a bridge is only curved in order to avoid some sort of natural or man-made obstacle, and as you can see, there's nothing like that for the bridge to avoid, and there's certainly no reason why you would go to the trouble of having the bridge go over the turntable area like it does. But this was another subjective decision that I made. Early on in the bridge planning process, I was going to have the bridge go straight across the table, because that was going to be the easiest and most practical thing to do. But as I continued to think about it, I realized that the bridge was a great opportunity to add some real character to the layout. And having it go straight across the table, in my opinion, was going to be very boring, because there are 3 straightaways down here, there are 3 more straightaways on the back side, and then 1 more straightaway on the upper level spine back there. So having 1 more straightaway across the table was going to be very dull, in my opinion, and so I made the subjective decision to have the bridge snake across the table instead of going straight across, in order to hopefully add some depth and character to the layout. And I think it worked, because this is now a very visitor-friendly bridge. Because think about it, if I'm visiting this layout and I'm standing right here, for the most part, the upper level train is out of reach, and I really can't get up close and personal with it. But now, with this bridge, because it rides out over these tracks down here, it now gets right up in the visitor's face and makes for a better visitor experience. So what I did essentially was I bent the rules of reality a little bit in order to make the entire layout experience better. Another subjective decision that I made was right here in the turntable area. These two thin support towers that you see under the bridge are very strong, and they're able to hold up my bridge and any train that's on top. But if this was a real-world bridge, those two thin towers would probably not be strong enough to hold up the weight of the bridge and a big freight train on top. And so for that reason, I was originally planning on adding a couple more support towers underneath here just to make the bridge look a little more plausible. I was going to add another tower right here, and then one more in between the red Genset Switcher and the Canadian Pacific MP15. But ultimately I decided to leave them out because it opens up the area under the bridge and allows you to better view the entire turntable area. Whereas if I had installed those support towers, it would have blocked the view of the turntable area and, in my opinion, diminished the overall experience of the layout. And so for that reason, I made the subjective decision to leave those support towers out and give you a better view of the turntable. The last decision that I'm going to talk about today is the color of the bridge. Why is it this green color? Because the Muir Trestle in Alhambra, California that inspired this bridge is not green. It's more of a whitish silvery color. So originally I was going to paint the bridge a rusty brown color like this bridge over here. But then once I made the decision to salt weather the bridge, that meant that I would have to put a color over the rust coloration. And so I thought about it for a while and decided on this green color. And that's because here in the state of Georgia, a lot of the highway overpasses, regardless of whether they're for trains or automobiles, have steel girders that are painted sort of this government institutional green color. And so that's what I decided to use. I had also pondered painting it white, but ultimately I decided on the green color, and I'm happy I did because I think it makes the bridge more unique overall. So all of these subjective decisions that I've mentioned get back to something that I've talked about many times before, and that is that I believe that a layout is a lot like a movie. And that sort of echoes the sentiments of the late great Frank Ellison, who believed that a layout was a lot like a play, with the trains being the stars of the play and the scenery being the backdrop for that play. And I really believe that. My sort of updated version of that is that it's like a movie, with the trains being the movie stars and the scenery being the special effects and props. And they really complement each other. A $1,200 engine looks okay going across a sheet of plain plywood, but it looks even better going across a finished, detailed layout. And so the scenery and the trains really complement each other, just like a good actor and good special effects complement each other. You wouldn't want to have a movie with a big star like Tom Cruise and then have really bad special effects. It just wouldn't be the same. And it's the same on a layout. You want to have both of them so that they each complement each other and make each other better. Now, just like a movie, sometimes it's okay to bend the rules to make it better. A good director of a movie knows when to bend the rules, because oftentimes there are things that work in the real world that don't work on film, and vice versa, things that work on film that don't work in the real world. And so a good director sometimes will do things in a movie that aren't quite realistic, and yet overall they make the movie better. And a layout is very much the same. So sometimes you can bend the rules of reality on your layout in order to make the overall experience better. Okay, now comes the fun part. This is a moment I've been waiting for 7 years, ever since I started work on the layout. So I'm going to go ahead and cut the ribbon, and we'll start running some trains across the completed bridge. Okay, I'm going to take my trusty scissors and give it a cut, and hopefully this will work on the first try. Okay, let's run some trains. The first train that I'm going to run across the bridge is the MTH Orient Express that you see back there. And that's simply because it's already on the upper level. So I'm going to start with that and move on from there. I'm going to try to mix it up and give you some variety and basically try to run a little bit of everything today. So let's get started. Okay, the MTH Orient Express is on its way around. The Orient Express is European O-scale, so it's slightly larger than American O-scale, and for that reason, the passenger cars are barely happy on O72. They really need something wider, like O81 or O90 or something like that. So you're going to hear some creaking and so forth. That's normal. There's nothing wrong. I will be doing a full review on the Orient Express in the near future, so keep an eye out for that.
4 out. to North Platte. If everyone is back on board, we can depart westbound for Kearney, Cozad, and our termination at North Platte.
Okay, so there you have it. I actually got to run more than 12 trains in this video, so it's always nice to overachieve like that. I hope you got to see the trains you wanted to see, but if you didn't, don't worry, because I'm sure I will run them in a future video. And obviously I can't run all of my trains in one video because that would be about a 4-hour video, and believe it or not, that would probably get boring after a while. But anyway, I'm really happy to finally have the bridge completed. That means I can start working on completion of the rest of the scenery on the upper level, and I'll talk more about that in coming episodes. The next video to come out will be a review for Lionel's Norfolk and Western Y3 locomotive, so keep an eye out for that. But for now, that's it. I'm Eric Siegel, and I'll see you next time. Okay, it's mid-July 2014, and I've totally forgotten what I was going to say.